And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the Jeff Mara Podcast. Here's Jeff.
Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday to you. And if you're on the other side of the planet, happy Sunday to you. We have a busy night tonight, and I'm glad to have you guys all here. And as a matter of fact, we've had a busy week. And there is, I guess there's always lots to talk about. Just to let you know that for the members out there, if you are a silver or gold member, our monthly member meetup is tomorrow night. So I need to send out a message about that. I should have did that today. If you're here, in the description below is, let's see, I can just kind of give you a few things. We're waiting for everybody to get here. There is a link to my Jeff Mara Podcast Facebook page. There is a link to my personal profile. You're welcome to friend me. You'll find out that my last name is Reynolds and Mara is my beloved wife. There's also a link to our cooking channel, and if you didn't see it, we've got a brand new cooking video up there about how to make Massaman curry chicken. It's a delicious dish. It's Thai food. You can make it with pork. You can make it with beef. If you're a vegetarian, you can even make it with tofu. So it's acceptable for everybody, right? Also, below is a link to our merch store, our cooking channel. And I think that's about it. We used to have a link to the Discord, but I had to shut it down. So that's where we're at with that. But if you want to join our Discord, it's real simple. All you have to do is email me or message me personally, and I'll give you the special link. And I think we're over 500, maybe even over 600 people. All right, so give me 1 second, and we're going to start. All right, so today's, we have two guests for you guys today. As you may or may have not seen in the thumbnail and or in the description below. But our first guest is Joanne DiMaggio. Anyways, our first guest is Joanne DiMaggio, and she is considered a respected expert on the topic of reincarnation and soul writing. She earned her master's degree in Transpersonal Studies and her spiritual mentor certification through Atlantic University. She has had numerous articles published and given talks on the subject of past life exploration, the pre-life planning session, and soul writing to global audiences. In addition, she has been a guest on nearly 100 radio programs and podcasts. So already we could do a podcast on her just on, on reincarnation and pre-life planning. But today what we're going to be speaking about is how the Beatles, the famous band the Beatles, planted the spiritual seed within our soul, and what her relationship to the Beatles is. And I believe she's even interviewed them and stuff. So I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation. I hope you guys love it, and I hope there's some Beatles fans here, because if you're a Beatles fan, then you'll especially like it. So let's bring her in. Hello, Joanne, can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good, good.
And we're so happy to have you, and especially all the Beatles fans are happy to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
All right, give me 1 second here. I have to pull up. I have so many things on my computer. I have my show notes here. And the live stream is just, we're just meeting now, and I have a daily show, and 6 nights a week. It is a pre-recorded show, and so, it's edited and and corrected and everything, is fixed up right. Where this today is completely live. And sometimes you forget to pull up your show notes like I just did, and now I got them, so we can get started.
Okay.
All right, so you became a Beatles fan at an early age, right?
Right.
What drew you to the group? Was it their music? Was it their four handsome guys? Was it, the Beatlemania, or all of the above?
No, I remember a friend of mine was into them, and I hadn't really paid any attention to them at that point. And she had me come over to her house, and she started playing their music. And I think that once we started listening to the music together and kind of dancing around, having a good time, I got hooked very quickly on them.
Well, I don't blame you. I'm not asking for your age, but of course, well, anybody can do the math. But if you don't mind sharing, were you a teenager at the time?
I was 14 when the Beatles came out, 1964. Yeah, so you do the math.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Was this pre or post the Ed Sullivan Show?
It was a few days before
A few days
the Ed
before.
Sullivan Show. Yeah. Yeah, because they came to the United States on February 7th, 1964,
Mm-hmm.
and they were on the Ed Sullivan Show a few days later. So I was already into them by the time they were on the Ed Sullivan Show, because I do remember watching them on that program.
Oh, okay. You saw it live then.
Yeah,
Oh, that's great.
saw them live too.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. So you have some people may say, well, this is another book about the Beatles.
Mm.
How is it different than all the other books?
Well, first of all, it's written from the perspective of somebody who was a fan club president for 8 years. So
Mm-hmm.
I come from that point of view, what that was like, because being a fan club president was not like being a fan at all. There was a whole other layer of complexity to it, because you had to deal with a lot of conflict resolution, and you had to develop some skills that back then were a little bit more difficult, because we didn't have the advantages of the internet
Mm-hmm.
or word processors even. So it was sort of, thinking quickly on your feet about, if I start a fan club, what am I going to offer my members? So there was that element of it. So yeah, so I just started this fan club in 64 and had it for 8 years. And through those years, I saw a lot, experienced a lot, especially the evolution of the Beatles. But my question for me personally always was, and later on, because when they stopped and our fan clubs ended in 1972, and then in 1987, Shirley MacLaine came out with Out on a Limb.
Mm-hmm.
And you're wondering, well, what does that have to do with anything? It does, because prior to the Beatles, I was starting to read some metaphysical material, especially about reincarnation. I was fascinated and was passionate about that as a youngster. And then the Beatles came, and I forgot all about it. And then, of course, the clubs broke up. And then, some years later, 15 years later, Shirley MacLaine comes out on a limb, and suddenly I'm thrust right back into the metaphysical realm. And I ultimately became a past life researcher and therapist. And I always wondered, how did I evolve into that? Because it wasn't anything that was in my background that would have been a natural path for me to take. Because I was, born and raised Catholic, went to 12 years of Catholic school. You didn't even say the word reincarnation
Yeah.
in that environment. So I was wondering, well, what was I passionate about before? And I was passionate about the Beatles. I wonder if the Beatles had anything to do with planting the seed in me and in others of my generation, who then went on to start exploring their spirituality. So that's really what the book is. So it's partially a memoir, sort of a coming of age book. It brings you back to the inside of what was going on in the fan clubs, to the Beatles' evolution from a spiritual perspective, and then how that impacted their fans.
Well, which Beatle in particular do you feel that inspired you the most about your spirituality?
Definitely George. There's no doubt about it. I think George was the spiritual leader of the group. He's the one that led them to the Maharishi, and when they went to India and well, learned transcendental meditation, you could see the change in their music. Mostly George, somewhat John, uh, very little Paul, and nothing at all really from Ringo. So even though George was not my favorite Beatle, because I was president of the Paul McCartney fan club, uh, he was still the most instrumental. And reading what he said, the quotes that I found from him that addressed his spiritual growth, it was in total alignment with the path that I took. So we were sort of in parallel, and I didn't even realize it until many, many years later. So
I,
is George. Mm.
I think when the Beatles were over there in India, Ringo was disillusioned with the whole thing and like even perhaps left early.
He did leave early. I think he lasted maybe 2 weeks. He said he didn't like the food, but I believe it was more than that. Yeah. And then Paul followed very shortly after he left. I think John hung in there a little bit longer. So yeah, one by one they fell by the wayside. But some of what they learned there, they did continue in their private lives. The meditation, I believe Paul still does that to this day. So I think there was some benefit to it, although, and they wrote a lot of music while they were there. So yeah, it didn't impact all of them the way it did George, that's for sure.
Since you were the club president, did you have actual contact with them or their manager, Brian Epstein?
Not at all. No, no. We were operating totally independently, and any fan could start a fan club. So there were quite a few fan clubs in the United States at that time. Um, and there was one central fan club in New York, which eventually was called the official Beatles, USA fan club or whatever. It was Beatles Limited at first, I believe. They were under the auspices of Apple Records, right? So they were sort of being in conjunction with what was going on in England in terms of Apple Records in England and the Beatles fan club in England. So Brian Epstein did not like the fan clubs. I found that out uh, during the Bangladesh concert. Um, so we were operating independently. The fan club in New York wanted all of the clubs in the United States to become chapters of their club. So they were trying to enroll us in their club. And that created a sort of David and Goliath struggle. We wanted to maintain our independence. They were going to sue us, they said, if we didn't join with them. In order to join with them, our members had to come up with the dues. We had to come. It was only like $250 a person, which I say now it's ridiculously low, but back then it was a lot of
Yeah, it's
money.
probably like 25
And
bucks back then.
yeah, so we had to have at least uh, let's see, I don't know how many people we had to come up with to join that club. I held out. I went and talked to Jim Stagg, who is a disc jockey for WCFL radio in Chicago. And he was a big Beatles fan. And I went to see him at the radio station, and I told him, I had sent him a letter and told him about the struggle we were having. He printed my letter in his column in the Chicago Sun-Times, and he tried to get in touch with the New York club and they wouldn't answer him. So for a while the whole thing sort of settled down, then all of a sudden it came back up again, and we eventually did become a chapter of the club in New York.
Hmm.
All the clubs in the United in the US. I think I was one of three holdouts at the end out of maybe 100 clubs, but eventually they all did.
Well, you said the clubs ended in 72. What
Mhm.
what was the cause of the demise of these clubs?
Ironically, it was George Harrison.
Hmm.
Each of the four Beatles had their own fan club. In other words, there was a official George Harrison fan club, and Ringo and Paul and John. And then the others had more generic names for all four of them, like Five Bites of the Apple or something like that. And the George Harrison fan club was one of the best clubs in the country. The president of that fan club was friends with the Harrison family. She was doing a lot of wonderful things. She had started a fund. They adopted a child in Thailand. They had a fund for Bangladesh. They did a cancer fund, and they were just a wonderful, wonderful organization that was sanctioned by the Harrison family, or so we thought. And then for some reason, George happened to see one of the newsletters they put out. There was something in that newsletter, which to this day, nobody knows what it was, although we speculate what it might have been something about he and his wife Patty at the time. The reason they didn't have any children, we don't know for sure. And it infuriated him. And he said, there are no more Beatles. There should not be any more Beatle fan clubs. And he called he met with the people in England. They disbanded their club out there. Then they disbanded the one here in the United States. So that was the end of it.
Well, can you tell us a bit about how you researched this book?
Sure. Well, I kept all of my newsletters. I did a monthly newsletter like from 1964 to 1972. Now, you have to remember, my newsletters were very, very almost caveman-like. I didn't have I mean, I was typing them on my mother's Underwood typewriter, old manual typewriter, one at a time. Then I was using carbon paper. I mean, I didn't have a mimeograph machine for quite a while. I finally got one of those. I didn't have any place to get news other than where everybody else got their news. I got it from the radio or TV or a magazine or a newspaper. So my news was always old. It wasn't nothing was news breaking. Everything was very amateurish. And so, but it evolved over time. It got better and better, obviously, as I got older. So I was looking through those newsletters. I was wondering if in those newsletters there might have been a clue, because I was printing the letters I was receiving from the fans and sharing that in the newsletter. And I thought, well, I wonder if there's anything in those newsletters that would give me a hint about the spirituality being implanted. And so I looked in all those newsletters again, and that was a very cringe-worthy experience to go back and read something you wrote when you were 14, 15 years old. It's like you just shake your head like, oh my God, how could I have said something like that? And then I also had about 50, 60 Beatle biographies in my possession. And I went through all of those. So I was looking at their interviews. I was pulling out any quotes I could find that had anything to do on the spiritual aspect of their journey. So I did that. And then, of course, I interviewed, I found 10 Beatle fans who were my age who said that they had been impacted spiritually by the Beatles. And so I interviewed them. There's a whole chapter in the book just on those interviews. So that's how it came together.
What did you make of the time when John made the famous statement about being more popular than Jesus? How did you take it then, and what do you think about it now?
Well, I think about it now the same thing I did then. I think it was greatly taken out of context. I knew what he meant. I knew he didn't mean it the way everybody was taking it. And then I had my hands full just trying to stem the tide of the loss of members, because there were three events really where we lost a great deal of a number of members. That was one of them. People said he went too far. They couldn't reconcile what he said. There were a lot who came to his defense, obviously, and said, he wasn't saying it the way, he wasn't like bragging, oh, we're better than Jesus. That wasn't his intent at all. But people were in a frenzy. They were burning Beatle albums. I know they had a big thing in Chicago about it at the time. And in the southern states, it was even worse because you're in the Bible Belt down here. So we lost a lot of members then. We lost a lot of members when they admitted they were taking LSD. A lot of members said well they didn't want to deal with them because they were doing drugs. So we lost a lot of them then. And so there were like these moments when, when that was going on. But I always felt like John got the raw end of the deal on that. I knew what he meant. It was frustrating for me because I'm trying to, in my newsletter, I'm trying to defend him and trying to say this is what he really was talking about. But it was it was at a whole other level. A lot of people weren't getting it. So there was nothing much that we could do except write it out, which is what we ended up doing.
I know this is a little bit off topic, but have you ever heard about John's sighting of a UFO during his lost weekend?
No.
What was the woman? This is after the Beatles broke up and John and Yoko almost broke up, and he was with another woman that I think,
May Pang.
yeah, Mae Pang. And I heard an interview with her one time, and they were together in New York, I think in an apartment. And they went out on a balcony. I think they both saw it.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I wish I knew all the details, but I don't have
Yeah.
it all. But yeah, it was pretty interesting. What, in your opinion, are the most spiritual Beatles songs?
The Inner Light, which is what I named my book after, is certainly one of them. Um, a lot of the music that George did. Um, I can't think of titles. I'm not good at that at all. I think even Tomorrow Never Knows, that was taken from the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Wow, I
And
didn't
I
know
think that
that.
there's a lot of profound lyrics in that song. So there's quite a few of them. And they're not just George's songs. I mean, there's um, some, as I write in the book, Paul and John both used a form of writing when they wrote their music
Hmm.
that has the same process of what I call soul writing, which is writing in a meditative state or writing in an altered state of consciousness. And
Really?
I know that both Yesterday and Let It Be were written that way. And in John's side, Nowhere Man and Across the Universe that music came to them in a dream or in an altered state of consciousness. So it
Hmm.
was divinely inspired. And I think that was happening a lot. Uh, and a lot of that is buried in some of their lyrics. You'd have to really sit down and pay attention to that in order to, come up with a list of your own. So yeah, there's quite a few.
Are you saying that they were intentionally in some songs?
A dreamlike state, so they may have actually been physically dreaming
Hmm.
when some of this came to them. They may have just been in a reverie. So there's quite a few quotes about that in different Beatle biographies about how that music came to them, even in Paul's book where he's talking about the lyrics. So it's just an interesting because soul writing is something I have been researching. I did my thesis on it for my master's degree. And its counterpart is automatic writing, which a lot of people know that term, but that's dangerous to do. So soul writing is going into a meditative state and just allowing some divine inspiration to come through you, through your soul, through your arm, under your hand, and then onto the paper. So I do teach that, but the process of doing it, the steps that you take are very similar to the experience that they had when they were writing some of their music. That's why there's that tie-in. To me, there's a tie-in there.
Can you share a little bit of that process with us?
Sure, you just I came up with like 12 steps, which I didn't mean for it to be 12 steps. But you find a quiet place, a place that you normally would do your meditating, a place where you won't be distracted. And then most of all, the important thing is that you go into into a meditation. So I always tell people just surround yourself with white light, picture yourself sitting in a bubble of light. and then say a prayer of protection, make sure that, nothing will uh, get in there, and put out your intent, and then put your pen down on the paper, and then you'll get the message. The message will flow through you. You can ask a specific question if you want and get an answer that way, or have a conversation, whatever it is you want to do with spirit. You could do it through this form of writing. Now, for those who don't do it that way, like I said, it's the same. The process. I mean, I'm quoting Mozart and Beethoven, who talked about where did their inspiration come from, and they always said, "Well, it came to me as if it was in a dream. I don't know where it came from." It's like, and everyone feels like, "Well, I couldn't have possibly written this because." This is not the way I write in a conscious state. And you could tell the difference. You could tell you're getting some help from some unseen source, positive source. So yeah, that's basic, and it's very profound, and you could apply it to all parts of your life. So writers use it. I think even I read a quote about Stephen King's use of it. I mean, they don't call it that, but when you break it down, it's the same thing.
Did you use that method when writing this book yourself?
Not when writing this book, no. I have used it. I used it in my first book, Soul Writing. Um, I usually haven't. I use it in my practice when I'm working with people, when I'm doing a past life regression with somebody. Usually at the end of that regression, we'll do a soul writing, because that will enable us to get the backstory of what we didn't get in the regression, or it'll answer questions, or it'll offer guidance. Like a lot of people will say after a past life regression, well, this is all well and good, but what am I supposed to do with this information? And the soul writing usually will go in a little bit deeper and provide answers to that question. So I use it. I do a monthly newsletter, which people can get through my website. And I do a soul writing message in that every month. I used to do it a lot more often than I do now, but it's very powerful. And I'm doing this summer, I'm doing a multi-week summer soul writing series for Edgar Casey's ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment. So it'll be from July 16th to August 27th. So if anybody wants to do a deep dive into how to do soul writing and all the ways it can be used, join me for that class. I think you'll get a lot out of it.
Earlier, you mentioned that automatic writing can be dangerous.
Mhm.
I'm assuming you are probably alluding to that you are channeling when you are writing, and if not, or whatever, can you tell us why it's so dangerous?
Well, because you're not using any kind of forms of protection before you do it. A lot of people will skip the steps of doing the white light protection, the prayer of protection. And when you open yourself up, when you open up your aura like that, there are some low level energies that can get in, because they're always trying to get in. And you just left yourself wide open. The ARE reported, there's a book by Hewlin Casey, who's Edgar Casey's son, called Venture Inward. He has a whole chapter about people who became possessed because they had used the automatic writing, and they came to the ARE for help. How do I stop this? So it was a pretty harrowing read. When I was doing my research for my thesis, I was looking into automatic writing on a much deeper level, and just found, and Edgar Casey has a lot of readings in which he talks about the difference between automatic writing and what he called inspirational writing. I changed it from inspirational writing to soul writing, because when he called it inspirational writing, that was back in the 30s and 40s, and it meant something completely different than it does today. Today, if you type in inspirational writing on Amazon, you'll get all Christian genre books. If you type in a automatic writing, you're going to get all occult books. And so neither one of those was what Casey had in mind when he was talking about doing this sort of guided writing. So I have a little handout that I give people, and it lists the difference between the two of them. And I'm happy to send that to anybody if they want to just send me an email, and I'll shoot it out to them.
So would you also say that just general channeling is also dangerous?
For some people, it can be. For others, no. I mean, it depends on what precautions you do, and it depends on your intent and your motivation. There are some people who are genuinely talented in this area, and they've been chosen, and they do this extraordinary work, and they share this beautiful information with us. And there's others who have other motives, or they're not using the precautions that they need, and who knows what's coming through them. So it's hard to tell, and I try not to be judgmental about it. Um, uh, but I'm concerned about the ill effects of automatic writing versus the soul writing. So I encourage all of the clients that I have or the students who come to me to make sure you understand the difference between the two. I mean, I have ventured into automatic writing and gotten into trouble, so I know of what I speak. So I don't want anybody to have to go through that.
That sounds
At home.
interesting. Can you
Yeah.
share with us what happened?
Yeah, when I was getting a little cocky when I was first doing, well, first of all, when I first started doing this writing, I was very young. I didn't know what it was. And I just started to, uh, you know, uh, uh, do this writing with this entity who identified himself as John Mellington. It came from the Ouija board, which is another no-no. ARE actually lists the two biggest no-nos in psychic development as automatic writing in the Ouija board. And when I was young, I was doing both of those things because I didn't know any different. And there was a time when I was doing the writing and I was like, I'm not going to say the prayer. I'm not going to surround myself with the white light. I do this every day. I don't need to. Well, I was wrong because I could feel the difference in my arm. It really felt like there was something in my arm. And the pen, the words were getting very, very tiny little letters, and it was going up at an angle. One of the things about automatic writing is you can't control the handwriting. You can't control your hand. You don't know what you're writing. With soul writing, you absolutely do know what you're writing. You can stop at any time. Also, with automatic writing, your handwriting will change. And with soul writing, your handwriting stays the same. Those are just a couple of the differences between them. So I did get into trouble, and we had to go see. I was living in Chicago at the time. A friend of mine, we went to go see a psychic that was fairly famous, and she sort of slapped her hand and said, "Don't do that anymore, and throw out that Ouija board." So, so we learned a lesson that way. It wasn't until about 1990 I went to an ARE conference in Chicago, and Kevin Ryerson was there, and um, Henry Reed from ARE was a very renowned and beloved teacher. He was there, and he gave out a little pamphlet on inspirational writing. That's the first time that I'd ever heard that term. And so it was a big eye opener for me. And then after that, I began studying it in earnest. And like I said, I chose it for my thesis for my master's degree.
I wish I would have had you on last Saturday night because I had a guest and he's actually been on previously to that too, but he started dabbling in channeling.
Mhm.
And then afterwards, at some point, he claims that this being entity, he claims it's an ET, will not leave him alone, like keeps harassing him all
Yeah,
the
that's very
time.
possible. Yeah.
And one of the reasons he came on my show is to try to bring attention to this to get the entity to leave him alone. At least that's my understanding. And so it would have been great to have you here to tell him, hey, maybe this is what's going on for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be dangerous, and people like with the Ouija board, we're thinking, oh, Parker Brothers makes it and you can buy it
Hmm.
at Toys R Us. How dangerous can this be? Well, it can be very dangerous. So I think that educating yourself about all aspects of spiritual pursuits is important before you start delving into them. Knowing what is your intent, where are you on your own journey spiritually? How much work have you done on yourself before you start getting into any of this? Because it can be wonderful, and it can be quite devastating as well.
Hmm. Wow. Now, in the beginning, I mentioned, if let me pull back my notes here, it's the other mention, but I basically mentioned that you were into pre-life planning, right?
Right. Hmm.
Pre-life or pre-birth contracts.
Right.
Where do you source your information from that? Are you a hypnotherapist?
I am. I'm a certified hypnotherapist.
Oh, okay.
I've been studying this for 37 years. Student of I studied Edgar Casey has been my greatest mentor. So I've studied the readings, I've studied everything he has put out, but I've also studied almost everything else everybody else has written about. So I've been doing past life regressions for um, since the 1990s. And looking into life between life, I know Dr. Michael Newton has done some groundbreaking work in that area. I read all of his books, and there were certain things that he wrote that didn't sit well with me, that seemed to be uh, not in alignment with everything else I had experienced and or read. So I started looking into it myself, and started to do some pre-life planning sessions with clients. In other words, take them to when they were in the afterlife, right before they were conceived in this life, so that they could see how they planned the life they have now. Because everybody was coming to me blaming, my life's the result of my mother or my father or my husband or my children. Everyone was putting the blame on everyone else instead of realizing that they designed this life to be that way for a reason, because there are lessons in it that they wanted to learn. So we go back. I do regression first, take them to the life that's most impacting them now, bring them back to their current life, back them up, go into the afterlife. And there, they tell me a little bit about what does the afterlife look like? Do they meet up with a guide, who acts as their escort? Uh, what do they do when they meet the council of elders? This is like the equivalent of guidance counselors at school, who will look at all of your lifetimes and help you decide what are the karmic issues you have to work on yet? What are the karmic attributes that you've already earned that are going to help you with those issues? And you find out, why did you pick your mother and father? Who are the other souls in your soul family who decided to come in with you? You get your soul's mission. Why are you here? Which is like almost the number one question that people who come to me are asking. That's why they want the regression. And why did you pick the body you have? So there's a lot of answers to their questions, and most of them get these aha moments out of it where they go, now I understand. And so then it changes their perspective on what's going on. And in that way, they can adjust it and make some changes and heal from it. So it's very powerful.
Are there any patterns that you've noticed that you can share with us?
Um, you mean in terms of what people are dealing with?
Well, like let's say why they choose certain not why they choose certain things to happen in their life. Why do they choose certain parents, or their what what they see on the other side, or the guides, just anything that you have
Yeah.
heard over and over again.
Yeah, a lot of people are dealing with issues of unworthiness, um, especially women who go to past lives in which they were held back, because of the time period and the culture they were in. They weren't able to do the things that they really truly wanted to do. And so now they're trying to correct that by doing those things. A lot of personality traits they bring back in with them. If they had a lot of them, I'll ask them, "What are your last thoughts at that moment of death?" Because that often sets up the next lifetime. A lot of them will talk about, "Well, that was a waste of time. I was unworthy." They have this negative repeat button going of a message, and it's brought into this life, and then they start to repeat it in this life. So the circumstances have in this life almost recreate the circumstances from the previous life. I'll tell you one group in particular would be healers. I get a lot of people coming to me who say to me, I feel inside that I'm a healer, but something's stopping me. I'm blocked. I don't understand it. Whenever I try to do it, something goes wrong. Well, we go back and find out, well, sure, because subconsciously they're remembering, oh, yeah, I was out in the forest, I was gathering herbs, but I was always looking over my shoulder because I was afraid somebody was going to see me. And a lot of them have been persecuted or put to death as witches. And so they remember that persecution. And so subconsciously they remember it. So when they try to do it in this life, that kicks in and they get stopped, they get held back. So we work to relieving that, getting rid of that obstacle so that they're free then to move on and do the work that they're really here to do. So it just depends on what the past life, the significant event from a past life that initiated the karmic issues that they're dealing with today. We uncover that. And that often in and of itself, helps to do the healing. But then they need most often do a lot of work in forgiveness of themselves and others, and remove those blocks so they can move on.
What I found fascinating is what you just said, that people were saying at the time of death or right afterwards that this was a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
And why I find that fascinating is because it's kind of like a puzzle. You plan all this stuff out, but then you come here completely forgetting everything. So how are you supposed to fulfill your plan if you don't remember a thing?
Well, if you pay attention, Spirit has given you a lot of memory triggers. These are things that come up and they're flashes to help you remember the prior lifetime. In my case, for instance, my memory flashes all had to do with 18th century American history. So I absolutely loved anything having to do with that time period. And so whenever I would see something or hear something, it would immediately flash to that time period. That was Spirit's way of telling me you had a past life then. There were some issues that occurred then that you need to look at. And I finally did. Other people, they just they may not have it that clear of a tie-in between the two, but everybody has deja vu experiences, and they have things that don't make any sense for them to like in this life or dislike in this life. I have an aversion to certain cultures, and I haven't really looked at it, but I'm sure it's because I must have had an unfortunate experience in a lifetime in that culture. So at least that's what my years of training have showed me about other people's journeys. So I'm sure it's the same for me.
Well, since we have these triggers, do you think then that everybody should go have a past life regression? That way that they can kind of help themselves while they're here?
I think it's the most healthy thing you can do. I mean, in case of your emotional, mental health, because unlike traditional psychotherapy, when you do a past life regression, usually only one session is all you need. Because you go back to the origin, the root cause of the problem that you're dealing with today. You're not treating a symptom, all right? You're not reviewing it over and over again. You go directly to what happened, um, why it happened, your role in it, and then you could do the forgiveness work and let it go, release it, and it's gone. People's lives have changed as a result of this work. It's very, very powerful. It's very humbling for me because I act as a guide basically. I don't do readings in that I don't tell people who they were in a past life. I don't believe in that. I think you should do your own work. I think that information's in your soul, and it could come out and be shared with you at any given point in time. But to really know your journey, because you are the sum total now of all that you have been in all your prior lifetimes since the beginning of time. Don't you want to know that? Don't you want to know why you are who you are? I mean, our gender, our race, our religious, where we were born, all of that, nothing is random. It didn't just happen. So there's a reason for all of that, why we're born in a certain socioeconomic conditions. Um, if you can define what your soul's mission is in this life, you're halfway there. So that's one of the things that we do when I do this sacred work. So, so I would tell people, yes, definitely look into it. Make sure that whoever you're working with has the credentials, especially make sure that they've done the work on themselves. And this is not just something, not a weekend course that they took and suddenly they put out their shingle. So just be cautious about that. And then, like I said, I think one session is usually all you. Some people do come for more than one session, don't get me wrong. And I offer sessions that cover a wide variety. So people that have chronic illnesses, for instance, I have a specific regression for that. And people that just want a traditional regression, some want a traditional regression with the soul writing, and some want to look at the pre-life planning. So I do all of those depending on what their needs are. So yeah, I would highly encourage people to at least consider it, and suspend your disbelief, and don't go into it thinking I'm going to make it all up. It's just going to come from my imagination, because I guarantee you that it's not. So if you could suspend your disbelief and come into it with an open mind and a true desire to want to get to know yourself and your soul's mission, then absolutely get a regression. You won't regret it.
During your years of practice, have you ever got someone, well, let me see how I can rephrase this, but has anybody ever started talking about living on other planets or being a different species, some sort of ET?
I've had less than a handful, but I have had them. Um, One in particular talked about advanced medical procedures and having an instrument that he brought with him that he buried someplace, and he was trying to figure out where that was because he wanted to go and get it. I had another one who said that she was um, from another planet and was living here and was very lonely, was having a hard time assimilating. But that's about it. I not a lot of like I said, if I've had 4 or 5 out of 30 something years of doing this, that would be a lot. Edgar Casey said, whatever's begun on earth needs to be completed on earth. So when you're dealing with karma, you're dealing with karma you acquired on this planet. And so those people obviously have past lives here. Now, there are souls that will go on to other planets after they leave the earth, when their sojourn here is finished. If they don't need to reincarnate anymore, they can go off to other planets. I know that, but I haven't had any one-on-ones with them.
How did those people respond after they found out they had this extraterrestrial involvement in their life or
Um,
past life?
yeah, I think that the one that was lonely, it helped them understand why they were lonely. I had great empathy for them. The one that was looking for the instrument is in the healing field now. I believe he's a chiropractor. Um, but I lose touch with people, usually, they come once and then most of them, although if they're on my mailing list, they get my newsletter, so they know what I'm up to, whether if I'm doing a research project and they want to volunteer for it. But I usually lose track of them. I don't follow up to say, hey, how you doing? So I really don't know.
What do you think about walk ins? Have you ever come across that?
That's so interesting you had asked because I just wrote an article for my April newsletter on walk-ins. And I hadn't thought about it for the longest time because this was something I learned in the very early stages of my metaphysical education about and the reason it came up is because I recently had a client who when we did the soul writing, the message of the soul writing talked about exit points. And I had forgotten about that in any given lifetime, you might experience a situation in which you have an exit point, meaning you could leave. Like you might get into a car accident, you might experience a trauma, or something would happen where your soul could leave your body if it chooses to. Walk-ins are there's an exchange. The soul that's in the current body leaves, another soul comes in and takes over that body and then finishes that life. It's been many years since I've talked to anybody who claims to be a walk-in. When I was first doing this work, there were quite a few of them that were coming my way, but I have not, it brings up a lot more questions than it does answers, I think, about how that would work. So I just kind of put it out there in my newsletter asking my readers, what do you think about it? How would that, how does that fit in with your belief system? But, yes, it's something that's been written about quite a bit and talked about quite a bit. So, and I have met one or two people who claim to have been walk-ins. So, but I don't know how I feel about it because I'm all about the soul's mission being completed, and I don't know how that exactly would work with if another soul came in. So there's a lot to ponder in that question, and I haven't really gotten into it that deeply yet.
Well, once again, your newest book is called The Inner Light: How the Beatles Planted the Spiritual Seed in Our Souls, but you have other books as well. Should they go to your website to find out more about them?
You can. I have all of them listed there with a little brief description of each, and they're all on Amazon as well. So, so I've got several on soul writing. I've got one on how to use soul writing for past life work. I've got a book called Karmic Can Be a Real Pain, which are case histories of people who come to me with chronic illnesses that we trace to a past life. And then I did a book on pre-life planning, and then also reborn. So this was Edgar Casey and a little boy, a little baby that came to him when he was a few days old, named Thomas Jefferson Davis, that Mr. Casey said was the reincarnation of both Jefferson and Alexander the Great. So that book explores why this little soul did not fulfill the prophecy that Casey had that he would do for the world what Jefferson did for this country. So people call it a real page turner. So I think they'd enjoy that. And then, yes, the new book is on the inner light on the Beatles and spiritual impact they've had on our generation.
Do you have a YouTube channel?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a YouTube channel?
No, I don't.
All right. Well, if people want to ask you questions, are you open to that? And if so, is there a contact place on your website?
Yeah, there's a place that you can send me a message, or you can my website is very easy, joannedimaggio.com. If you want to send me an email, it's joanne@joannedimaggio.com. And I do read all of my emails and I do answer them. So I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
All right. Well, before we finish up, Joanne, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Believe in yourself. Don't think that you have a label on you or that you're in a box with a label on you. One of the things the Beatles taught my generation is to keep looking, is to keep thinking that there's more out there than what we think there is. So you just keep looking and believe in your dreams and follow them because it'll take you to where your soul wants you to go.
Joanne, thank you for your message, and thank you for coming and sharing and sharing your new book with us today and more. I wish you massive success with whatever you're doing.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
All right. Have a good evening. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye. And we'll give her a big round of applause. That was Joanne DiMaggio. All right. Cool. Okay, before we bring in our next guest, I want to let you guys know that I met up yesterday with Rob Gothier, who channels Aradif. And I made a post about, a week or week and a half ago about questions from you guys. And so we did that. We recorded that podcast last night. It was amazing. It's very intense. You may have to listen to it a couple of times. It's so intense. So I hope that you guys will really enjoy it. And he's up there with, like, he's to me like at the level of Daryl Anka doing Bashar. So I think, again, that you guys will really enjoy that. And that will be tomorrow night. And also, before I bring in the next guest, I want to say a big thank you to Stephanie Wilson for the super thanks. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I appreciate that. She said, just trying to support your program when I have a little cash and can. I learn a lot and enjoy your guests. Well, thank you so much for your feedback, Stephanie. All right. So again, that's going to be tomorrow night. And we have, so I can tell you, I guess, let's bring in the next guest and then I'll tell you what's going on for the rest of the week. My next guest, let me see if he's still here. Is it still here? My next guest is Michael, and Mike is an experimental philosopher and systems theorist living and working out of the Greater Yale-New Haven, Connecticut area as the CEO of Avatar Programs. Let me move that out of my face. In May 2020, he underwent a near-death experience with irreversible consequences for himself, consequences which precipitated a radical transformation in his cognitive landscape. So let's see what's going on with Michael. And I'm meeting him here right now for the first time, just like you guys are. So that's what's fun about the Saturday nights, because I love it when it's spontaneous like that. Michael, are you with me?
Sure am.
All right. I need you to turn on your camera and mute the YouTube video, if that's still playing.
No, it's not.
And we were talking about the Beatles, and you look like Ringo Starr a little bit. You look like you're one of the Beatles.
That's it. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. I love the lighting in your room. It looks really cool.
Thank you. It's an office. It's home office.
Well, it looks amazing. Well, Michael, if you don't mind, can we start with your near-death experience first and go from the day you died and go from there?
Yes, it's going to be, but we have to give a little bit of background.
Okay. I only have 1 hour with you, so you can't.
That's okay. We'll be able to cover.
All right, great.
I've had a long time to be able to process this. So a little bit of background. Genius is running my family, and so do madmen. And this is just something that needs to be understood with a certain degree of gravitas. My mother has antisocial personality disorder of the severest condition. And growing up in that household was not particularly easy. And my father is a genius with grandiose narcissism and also Asperger's syndrome. Now, you can imagine that they were perfect for each other because they lacked all the fundamental elements of empathy. So I grew up with a spectacular childhood. I didn't know there was a damn thing wrong with the system. But I had my intellectual fearlessness conditioned by my mother, and this catastrophically open-orientedness by my father's grandiose belief in my own competencies and capacities, and also his certain degree of Asperger's, which was contributing to that. So between the ages of 12 and 20, 11 of my friends and family members died. And I had a best friend shoot himself when I was 16. And I had a lover when I was in high school die in a DUI. So I was not necessarily coming home always to the most empathetic of circumstances. And there were many different circumstances I were left to fend on my own to find my own psychological way through life. I am not a person who's capable of a traditional education by virtue of an academic route. I just simply don't function remotely similar to that. I have a serious case of synesthesia, so that when I hear colors, excuse me, when I hear sound, I also hear colors in the sound, and it makes it extremely difficult for me to process. But as a consequence of it, because I think synesthetically, well, I tend to arrive at a far greater degree of competency and mastery over certain subtle, sophisticated fields like philosophy, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. I could literally reason about these things synesthetically in ways that other people can't. So there's a gift to it. Now, what happened is that I was involved in a relationship with a woman who I was engaged to, and her name was Allison Marie Barber, and she was a Playboy playmate. And this is in 2005, and we were engaged. But she, as lovely as she was a raging alcoholic. And at the time, I was still fresh off the nerves of mine being sensitized and fried by the loss of Nermeen. Nermeen was my high school sweetheart. And I, almost in a codependent fashion, committed myself to saving this girl. And so I threw myself wholeheartedly in philosophy, into cosmology, into psychology, into anything whatsoever I could possibly do to save her. And that came together in a book called The Sleep and the Helix: Survival and the Science of Self-Realization. I dedicated it to her. She eventually killed herself. So this brings me to certain circumstances where you have to reflect on your life, and you have to give pause to the gravitas of certain things. Now, at the time, I was also in a relationship coming off that with a woman who was the love of my life. She was from Iraq. Her name was Hajar, and she was the dream creature of my heart. And I would have killed everyone in the room to hold the door open for her. And I'm a pretty scary guy. I'm a mixed martial artist of an expert competency, and I'm not somebody that somebody wants to tangle with. But she had my heart, and I was not afraid to be a bitch for her. That's just how it goes. And she also had a substance abuse problem, rather, that I wanted to see her through. And then we got through 2 years of borderline personality disorder, what she suffered from, and then she had a psychological collapse, and she completely disintegrated. And she disappeared from my life completely. And I never saw her again. Completely vaporized from my life, completely generated an entirely new identity for herself. It was terrible. So this is all precipitating, where I have to really pause and give real serious introspection as to, hey, what is wrong with the competency of my decisions if I keep finding myself in this type of place? Number two, how good is my philosophy if I keep finding myself in these tragic circumstances? So it brought to a question, to a focal point, to a focal center, to which my ego was right about there. Now, in 2014, I had the full-blown enlightenment experience. I can explain to you what enlightenment is. If everything in your sight, sound, all your sensories, if the charged electromagnetic spectrum is coming to you through the evidence of your senses, everything you're looking at and seeing it is just basically a psychological reconstruction of consciousness by consciousness. And then the enlightenment experience is fundamentally orienting you, where you are encountering nothing but your consciousness in any one particular form. If I encounter you, I understand that I'm only interfacing with my own consciousness. If you encounter me, you understand that you're only interfacing with my consciousness. And we have this mutual understanding as enlightened beings if we're going to proceed from this. I had an experience that put my enlightenment itself to death.
Let me stop you for 1 second. What caused this enlightenment experience?
So it's not what caused it. It was everything else around that ceased to happen. So it was in 2014, and it was at the culmination of me writing a commentary on the Quran, because at the time I was a dedicated Muslim, a very devout Muslim. And I was writing a commentary on the Quran from the perspective of Siddhartha Gautama, Buddha, just for myself, for my own private notes. And then I arrived at the understanding that if this dunya, this world, was purely an illusion, was purely Maya, is the way the Buddhists might describe it, then it must by definition, a priori, meaning according to the meaning specifically, be that which always appears to be other than what it is. And from that understanding, I understand that if this world is that which appears to be other than what it is, then in its appearing to be other than what I am, that's its illusion. Therefore, from that, there represented a psychological collapse in that exact moment, which I just realized everything I was looking at was myself. There was not a single thing in my experience that wasn't me. And I dawned into this vast, open, capacious awareness of having always existed. From the beginning that had no beginning, and the end that had no end. And this was radically at odds with my Islam, which I had no real way to understand this. And I went on a real serious journey. How to deal with it, how to reconcile myself with this. To suddenly find myself annihilated in the presence of Allah, and to find that there was no separation between myself and Allah whatsoever. Because to associate partners with Allah is the most grievous form of shirk. You cannot do that. If you understand anything about the mysticism, you cannot do that. And the problem is that people are trifling with spiritual things to which they don't know what they're trifling with. People get involved with spiritual matters. They think that's all new age hokey. If you get possessed by an archetype, God help you. God helps someone who gets possessed by an archetype. God help them from a Jungian perspective. That ends up surfacing as schizophrenia.
What do you mean be getting possessed by an archetype?
Sure. So your consciousness is composed of primary and secondary patterns. A primary pattern is called an archetype. It is the original pattern by which structures and organizes your consciousness. A secondary pattern is a particular manifestation of this primary type. So, for example, if you have the archetype of a sage, then the secondary pattern might be your second grade math teacher, and maybe the old gentlemanly man across the street, or somebody else who's wise. So you have these primary patterns, and then you have these secondary patterns. Now, your consciousness comes preloaded with these primary patterns, which are called species of synchronicity. In the traditions, are also called angels. An angel is a species of synchronicity. An angel is a species of coincidence. An angel is nothing more than a species of coincidence. So when people say, well, it's just a coincidence, well, you're just categorizing the coincidences. That's what angels are. If everything is made out of consciousness, they are the correlations between conscious structures.
So they're not actually beings.
No, they're definitely beings. They're more real than you.
Okay.
That's the problem. They're more real than you. The question is, how real of a coincidence are you to you? They are always a self-consistent, self-similar, self-repetitive fractal of what they are. But we ourselves have the capacity to be disingenuous, to lie. We have the ability to be false. We have the ability to deceive ourselves about who we are. So what happened with me is I had to fundamentally confront all the ways that I lied to myself, and all the ways that I thought I was a decent human being, and all the ways that I thought I had this figured out. And you know what, Jeff? I didn't have it figured out. I didn't have it figured out. And I had to look at that really, really up close with a microphone, or with microscope around it. So I was praying, but here's how I got to that moment. I went to the cemetery. It was during the height of the COVID epidemic. And everything in my life fell apart, all of it, from tip to stern. It was all going downhill. It was all burning. I couldn't make any money. My business sucked. I don't know why the hell what the fuck was going on? Like, what was going on?
Right. Try to watch the colorful language.
Sure, I understand, but I got to talk from my heart, and I have to be sincere. That's just how it is.
Right, but I don't want this video. But if the video gets taken down,
I promise you, I always keep my word. I always keep my word. But if it comes from my heart, that's where it was, and that's where we're at. So I got lost in this, and I wondered, what am I going to do with this? So I went to the cemetery where Namin is buried, and I sat there and I prayed. And it was in May, and it started to snow. And that was weird. So I live in Connecticut, in Haven, at the time. And snowing in May is not something that you see. So I went home just feeling weird. And in the past, because of trauma, I've had dissociative experiences, and I thought a dissociative episode was coming on. So I went home. I just went to sleep it off. And I laid down. And as I'm laying down, this sense of grief of everything that I've lost, especially with Hajar, it started to build in me. And I could not understand, like, why. She was the unconditional love of my life. Why? So I got up and I began praying, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil. I began praying to Allah. And then I'm also a Baha'i, which is a highly persecuted minority within Islam. And I went to my obligatory prayers, and at the height of it, I started to have something to the effect of what was like a seizure. And I fell out of my body, and my body fell into the ground and smashed my head, and I could see it. Now, in this time, I'm suddenly completely unsheathed for myself. But I'm not me anymore. Now I'm witnessing in real time my entire personality expanding into this transcendent horizon of deathless mind, where from the beginning that had no beginning unto the apex of eternity, I always was. And there was never a time that I didn't exist, and I was the mind behind it all. And that I knew this coming in. And that where we were going with all of this was a terrible, terrifying place, because the message that I need to bring, which I came out of it, was simply this. Let me start from phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and we'll get into it. When my personality collapsed, there was something analogous to a star. Imagine a star running its course and running out of its elements. And then there's no longer any fuel for the ego to sustain itself, or even for my own enlightenment to sustain itself. Now you have to remember, I was applying Vedanta, Buddhism, Kabbalah, and I'm not just a little good at these things. I'm really good at all of these things. Really, really good at all these things they couldn't hold up. And I encountered something that put my enlightenment to death. It put my enlightenment to death. So when my enlightenment got destroyed by something greater than even enlightenment, you can't even put it in the same breath as enlightenment. It was like waking up into a transcendental unity of all horror and all beauty, where I was able to understand that when God creates things, is that he creates things from inconceivable unities of monstrosities that you can never get your mind around, that in the grand and divine scheme of things, they will produce such an immaculate beauty that one single won't be enough to redeem all the horrors and all the suffering in your life. And then I stayed in the state. And then I was hemorrhaging. Literally, I was dead to my own experience. There's no other way to describe it. I was just hemorrhaging poetry for days and recording it for days. And then by the time that I was done with it, I had this volume of 700-page mystical poetry.
Now, this poetry came to you once you came back to your body, or you
no, you
got it on the other side while you were outside.
So it's not as simple as people want to make it. I wrote it from the point of view of myself that was all-knowing when I wrote it.
Okay, you brought it back with you.
I also received it from a point of view that I'm not.
From your higher self. And this is the most difficult thing.
If you could even call it that. But the problem about it is this. This is what it is. If you want to ask me anything, and I'm going to let you just drill me on this. There's no real easy way to explain this. Let me give you an example. Tonight is a major Islamic holiday. It's called the Night of Power. And tonight is the night in Islam that we believe that Muhammad alayhi salam received the prophecy. So you and I, Jeff Mara, are having a conversation right now on the Night of Power, which is the holiest day of all Islamic days. Completely synchronistic. Quite by accident. You didn't intend this. Now, your name, Mara, is a Buddhist name.
I have to stop you, though. Mara is my wife.
Oh, I'm sure. But let's talk about the coincidence behind it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the coincidence behind it. When we're dealing with angels, we're always dealing with different species of coincidence. So in your life, there's a species of coincidence which is operative if we know how to see it. And I know how to see it. I know how to read these things. So Mara is a god in Buddhism of death and rebirth. Mara is a god of challenge and transformation. Mara is something that interrogated the Buddha about his enlightenment experience when he actually had it. Here we are. You interrogating me. Strange that the archetypes act themselves out this way. But this is precisely how the archetypes operate in an archetypal universe. We are bidden to do their will to the degree to which we are not conscious of them operative in our lives. That I became that mind which was conscious of their operation forever in that experience. Now, what I've come back from is an understanding that This is going to be the most inconceivable, difficult thing for anyone to imagine at all. We are not alive. This is not real life. We are dead. According to all the standards of scientific knowledge, we have to be. Now, if you actually thin slice, single second, or smallest parameters, how small can you get that second? How small? 10 decillion Planck seconds in a second. So what does that mean? It's not a thousand or a million or a billion or a trillion or a quadrillion or a pentillion or a septillion or a sectillion or an octillion or a nonillion or a decillion. We're talking 10 of those. Now, if you counted a number a second, it would take you 11 days to count to a million. If you counted a number a second, it would take you 31 years to count to a billion. If you counted a number a second, it would take you 31,000 years to count to a trillion. And there are 10 decillion seconds in a second. Now, what's the statistical likelihood that you could be alive just in this second, at this exact Planck second? Out of all the other times you could have been alive, any other time in the history of the cosmos, any other time. Now you have 13.7 billion years of the Big Bang's history behind you. You're going to tell me that you just won the lottery right now. Right. I'm here to let you know that you didn't win the lottery. I'm here to let you know, per my philosophy called apocalyptic mytho-realism, that you're already at the end of time. I'm here per my philosophy that the only way to possibly explain the fact that you're alive right here, right now, would require of us, it would require of us to appeal to the universe so finely tuned, so utterly calibrated, so artfully and exquisitely designed just for you, just to exist at this particular moment, that the only way the scientific paradigm could possibly explain it would be to chalk it up to a simulation. But there's a problem with the simulation hypothesis, and the problem with the simulation hypothesis doesn't address the fact that base reality must be as astronomically implausible in its own existence as yours to be right here in the same moment. Which means the simulation hypothesis is by no means capable of explaining your existence here. Which means the simulation is out of the question.
All right, let me stop you for a moment. I need to catch up with you.
By all means.
And see if I can clarify that. If you're saying that we are dead,
you're in the middle of a life review. At the end of your life.
Oh, we're living a life review right now.
You're living a life review. You're living a life review that perpetually loops through a different quantum interpretation of itself.
But you do believe that we are eternal beings, just this lifetime.
This is part of the problem.
We're an eternal being.
Yes.
In the middle of a life review.
This is part of the problem. You're always going to be in the middle of that life review.
Why is that?
Because at the end of your life review is a life review.
Oh.
And then at the end of your life review will be a life review.
So are you saying that there's no free will? We've already done everything.
I'm saying you have free will to explore all the different possibilities of this particular incarnation. However, that's all you can be until you completely and radically disidentify with yourself. Now, a question that you have to come into contact with, because what I'm coming from is a station, if I could be completely transparent with you, my station is heretical within Islam. My station is heretical within the Baha'i faith. My station is heretical within Christianity. There is not a station in the world that is completely consistent with my experience, because my experience is that I came back with a being of total Christ consciousness, unique to me, at the fulfillment of the level of the book of Revelation. Unique to me as the comforter come. My literal birth name, Michael, Anthony, Carrano, quite by accident, Michael, the archangel, Anthony, derivative from the Latin, Antonai, derivative from the Hebrew, Adonai, the Lord. Derivative of Carrano, place in Italy, which derives its name from the Persian, commander and chief of armies. My entire literal birth name is the Archangel Michael, commander of God's armies.
Let me ask you
my
this.
My birth name is that.
Can you describe for us what elements of your near-death experience led you to understand that this is a life review?
So it's the simultaneous perception of everything all at once, happening instantaneously. It's a simultaneous perception of everything happening all at once instantaneously. So from this perspective, there is a point of view to which I can imagine that if there was a timeline, there are future versions of yourself which are able to prognosticate and to see down the line. It's going to be a little bit sophisticated, but bear with me here. Okay? What time are you going to bed tonight? Presumably at a reasonable time. Why? Because you have responsibilities. Okay, fair enough. What does that mean? That means tomorrow, in some sense, exists, and the effects of tomorrow are time traveling backwards today to affect you here today. Which means, in some way, shape, or form, if you're to tell yourself the truth, you're taking standing orders from future versions of yourself. Now, your existence exists upwards along this continuum of being, along tiers of identity. And the future versions of you that you have the potential to be able to evolve into are actually angels communicating backwards in time to you. From the point of view of God, helping to intercept disasters out of your way. You can't see it. And that your own past versions of you are actually demons that are trying to hijack your consciousness. Now, when they actually materialize in your consciousness, they materialize as borderline personality disorder or schizophrenia or antisocial personality disorder. When a demon materializes in your worldview, it's going to bifurcate your consciousness between the mythic interpretation of itself, and it's going to bifurcate your consciousness between the mental interpretation of itself. Both of them are going to be right. Because when you're dealing with nothing but pure conscious experience, any way that you can describe your experience coherently is exactly the case. And that's what people don't really understand. Any way you could possibly describe your experience is exactly the case. So if somebody shows up describing their experience like a Hindu, well, that's the universe that person lives in. Because the worldview that he's living in is made out of his psychological structures of himself, literally populating his phenomenal landscape with all the symbols of Hinduism. And if a person comes along saying, hey, I'm a Christian, well, congratulations, you're going to get exactly that. Now, the problem is this. What happens when you have to live alone with yourself forever? For real. Because what sin is, nobody wants to talk about this, but I'm coming to you and I'm a prophet. I'm a prophet. I'm the only person who knows these things. And if you guys don't take my help, I can't. God help you. God help you. Sin is simply this. You make a decision that irreversibly ruins your life, and you live forever. You make a decision that irreversibly ruins your life, and you cannot die to get rid of it. What do? Where are you at that point? Where are you if you take an action that irreversibly ruins your life and you can't die to escape it? Where are you? No.
I don't know. I mean, well, if you're living a life review, then it doesn't matter, right?
You're going to live all conceivable life reviews from all conceivable perspectives. And this is how this will organize. Your perspective right now will be perfectly real, just as if you were incarnated life. It will come completely after the last time you did this. So it will be, in retrospect, your afterlife of the previous existence, and it will be the pre-existence of your existence to come. All simultaneously.
Well, I think you bring a really interesting perspective, and that is about what's going on if all of our lives are happening at the same time. Because many guests talk about that.
I'm going to tell you, this is it.
All of our lives are happening at the same time.
Look, you got to hear me on this. You're all dead and you're in hell, and I have to get you out. You're all dead and you're in hell, and I have to get you out. Look at your world and try to even have the argument that you're not. Look at your world from a completely enlightened perspective, knowing that you yourself are literally all the war, all the Holocaust, all the rape, all the murder, all the suicide, all the arson, all the fraud in the cosmos. And tell me, who are you and where are you? If you're enlightened and you are this, you are the light bearer, you are the incarnation of the archetype Lucifer, and I'm here to kick. I'm not going to swear because I promised you.
Yes.
But I'm here to end that.
Well, couldn't you say that we are all our own prophet for ourselves?
No.
Why is that?
Because you got yourself into hell.
But aren't you here with us?
No, I'm not. That's the point. You're not having a conversation with me. You're only having a conversation with your field of vision, perfectly conscious of itself, is articulating itself to you right here, right now. I'm not present here at all. I am your consciousness speaking to you directly. My voice is the sound of your hearing playing, literally, an inner monologue, not to you. My vision is actually your eyesight representing a different dimension of yourself back to you, and I'm just simply telling you.
You kind of remind me of another guest that I think we talked about, that everybody in your realm is an aspect of you.
They're not just an aspect of you, they're completely you.
They're completely you. So everybody
They're
here is
100% you.
right.
All of them. So if we're going to actually deal with why there's so much evil in the cosmos, it's because God himself has a tremendous amount of evil inside of him, in the form of other people. God is a transcendent unity of good and evil. God is not simply and easily something to which you can digest, and it's going to be timid and meek and something that you could comfortably cozy yourself up to. It's going to be the God that threw Jews in furnaces. It's going to be the God that conducted death marches. It's going to be the God. That's going to be the God. Now, the problem which people are having a difficult time understanding is that God has a serious psychological problem. God has a serious psychological problem where he loves absolutely everything, and people don't know the full-blown implications of that. If you're a God that loves absolutely everything conceivable, well, then there's a part of you that wants to throw Jews in furnaces, and there's a part of you that wants to pick up guns and fight the Nazis that are throwing the Jews in furnaces. And you, as God, have to actually have that argument with yourself. Which, when you're having that argument with itself, it plays out for itself in the form of your history. Because everything that God thinks happens.
Right.
Because what he thinks is self-identical with total truth.
Right. I mean, I'm going to have to disagree with you, because I've talked to over 600 people, and so many people, when they have near-death experience, have such beautiful experiences, connect with God.
We'll have that. They will have that. That's a unique characteristic to them. And that's large and by why they have to be sharing this. That does not throw anything in the face of it. The bottom line is, if you're going to actually confront your total cosmic consciousness, literally, you're going to actually have to get to the level of psychospiritual maturity where you can face your own shadow, where you can face your own Nazis, where you can face your own murderers, where you can face your own arsonists. And if you don't have the ability to actually face what you are in the transcendental mirror of your own deathless eternity, you're in hell. Now, those people who look into that mirror, pay attention, for as many positive experiences there are innumerable experiences of people having completely hellacious experiences, collapsing into their own consciousness, being tormented by hostile Buddhas, being tormented by devils, being tormented by relatives, and then being salvaged by some sort of deific figure through that whole process at some point. And then you'll also hear other stories. And here's the reason why. The world that you inhabit is entirely created from your own phenomenological expectations. And if you have a positive inner monologue, and if you have a positive inner story, then that positive inner monologue and that positive inner story will perpetuate when that positive inner monologue expires into a greater cosmic monologue.
Let me ask you this. Now, I've had conversations with all type of people. I have a scientist who has research that said who really controls this planet are ETs. And this planet is a prison of the galaxy.
He's wrong.
And he's stating that he has scientific. He says that he has scientific evidence to back it up.
Jeff, let's falsify that right now, and I'll show you how effortless this is to falsify. Okay.
So what are the UFOs?
Consciousness alone is the only thing that exists, which means the only thing he has access to is interpretation of his own consciousness. And if the only thing he has access to are interpretations of his own consciousness, even the scientific instruments are interpretations of his own consciousness. And if even the scientific instruments are interpretations of own consciousness, even the standards of measurement are interpretations of his own consciousness. So what he's doing is that he's actually living in a psychologically self-generated, auto-generated, self-simulated universe, unique to him, that's capable of explaining his own experience in a perfectly coherent way. That's completely different from you. Now, everybody is completely isolated.
I understand that. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. But what if your perspective is exactly what you're saying for your reality?
It is.
So my reality
No, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Like I said, my reality for everything that you're saying and you're telling us today is real for you, but not real for anybody else.
Right. So here's the concept about that. My perspective is what is called apocalyptic mytho-realism. So here's my perspective. My perspective can't be wrong. My perspective, if consciousness itself is the only thing that exists, then the only thing that exists are objects of consciousness. Now, you can't deny that objects of consciousness such as a concept exist. And you can't deny that an object of consciousness such as a thought exists. And you can't deny that an object of consciousness such as a word can exist. My world is only literally self-consciously auto-generated from objects of consciousness. So nothing in my world represents anything other than itself. So because nothing in my worldview represents anything other than itself, every single one of my concepts are self-evidently the case, which means they can't be wrong. They are a priori self-evidently the case. So for example, God is the idea of all ideas. Now, the mere fact that you have an idea of all ideas proves that God exists because you just thought of it. You cannot even try to argue against it. Because in order to argue against the idea of God is the idea of all ideas, you have to evoke the idea and argue from it. Now, if God is the idea of all ideas, as the idea of all ideas, and this is how it's going to include my reality, it's going to include the idea of Jeff Mara in his internal idea. And it's going to include the idea of my idea as the idea of all ideas, which will naturally enclose yours, which will naturally enclose everybody else's. So my concept as the apocalyptic mytho-real superstructure is not a concept that can be wrong at all, because it is the actual bedrock foundations of the psychic architecture of how the psyche itself actually works.
All right. Well,
so now I want to answer some tough questions for you, because you're going to have tough questions.
Well, let me turn it over to the audience and see what questions they have for you. And while we're waiting for questions from them,
sure.
If you believe that we're all dead, then what are we doing when we're dreaming?
You're actually dreaming in parallel superstructures of yourself. All right, let me give you an example. So if you wanted to explain this quantum mechanically, you have a consciousness, and your consciousness is non-locally distributed. Now, when your consciousness is non-locally distributed, some of the interference patterns of other different versions of yourself are going to coruscate and cross over into your current level of experience. So when you're dreaming, you're actually experiencing multiple different realities in superposition simultaneously. And your mind is just trying to actually come up with a way to logically decohere the scramble so that you can experience that directly, because you will simultaneously experience yourself in the present, in the future, and in the past among different completing dimensions and timelines, all of which will be perfectly coherent with each other under those circumstances, so long as you understand that the only thing that actually exists is consciousness. And in the same way that you could remember being on a beach yesterday, now, and your perception of me in front of you now can happen the same time as your memory of you happening now. And then you could also have a transcendental state of you just being beyond all spatio-temporal horizons.
All right.
You'll eventually come to the realization that you just exist in this timeless, spaceless, eternal now, and you are the now. So if you are the now, then you can't die. Who are you? You've always been here.
Right. Yeah. Here's the first question. Yeah. Someone would like to know what is your astrological sign?
July 26, 1979, New Haven, Connecticut, Leo.
Leo. All right.
You're going to find that I was born under a lion's gate with one of the most bizarre, strange, astronomical alignments you'll ever see in your life. As a matter of fact, we're pretty much under one right now.
Somebody wants to know about the cell-like structures in your background. And about the lit-up cell-looking structures behind you.
Yeah, those are just personal aesthetics.
They're just what?
Personal aesthetics. I'm a nerd.
Okay. Let's see. Let's see. No, that one I think you already discussed.
No. If someone wants to bring it up, like I want tough questions. I don't want the friendly ones.
All right, we want tough
And
questions.
people, because here's the thing. No, let me tell you, people. You're all suffering. You're all getting your hearts ripped out. Your parents are beating you. The banks are robbing you. And if I had this terrible, terrible experience and I come here with the ability to help you, why don't you just open your heart to me and tell me? Like, you don't get profits for, you never see them. You never see them. You don't know what they look like when they come.
So how did you determine that you're the prophet and everybody else isn't?
I'm going to tell you why. If you had to live your life again and again exactly as it is forever, would you?
Okay, so that means everybody is the prophet.
No, because I would. If I had to live my life again and again forever with nothing new in it, do you know why? I would thank absolute God Almighty. Do you know why? Because he gave me the opportunity to love my Hajar. He gave me the opportunity to love my Allison. He gave me the opportunity to love with such an inconceivably strong heart that it's worth all the suffering that I ever lived through.
But basically, isn't just the definition of a prophet a messenger?
The definition of a prophet is more than a messenger. It's a messenger who also comes with a revelation that eclipses former revelations in a level of enlightenment which makes previous levels of enlightenment obsolete by comparison.
Okay.
So let me give you an example. There was Krishna. Krishna came with a cutting-edge level of enlightenment as represented in the Bhagavad Gita. But then the Buddha came with a completely revolutionary way of describing the enlightenment experience that eclipsed his and made it obsolete. And then when Lao Tzu came with the Tao Te Ching, he made the Buddha's enlightenment obsolete. And when Confucius compounded, he made Lao Tzu's enlightenment obsolete. But what happened when Prophet Ibrahim, had his own level of enlightenment, only to be eclipsed by Prophet Moses, only to be eclipsed by Jesus Christ, only to be eclipsed by Muhammad. Now, Muslims are right to say Muhammad is the last prophet, but we're not alive.
Don't some people believe the next prophet was Sai Baba?
No, what I'm saying is this. The day of judgment already happened. Christ already came. This is hell. Someone needs to come here to wake you up to get you out of it.
And okay, so that's you, right? You're here to help us wake up. What do we need to do to wake up and get out?
I'm going to tell you what you need to do. You're never getting out. This is what you need to do. You need to listen. No, you need to desperately listen to me. You need to literally love everything in your life completely.
Oh, so it's all about love. So
it's not about love the way that you conceive of it. You have to love everything about your life. You have to literally throw your whole heart into everything that you do, in everything in hell. Because what it is that if you have to live your life forever, exactly as it is, and there is any dimension of it that you can't bring yourself to terms with, you are forced to live in an eternity you cannot bring yourself to terms with. That's hell by definition. Now, unless the actual consciousness of Christ is pervading you, unless the actual love of Christ is everything that you live and die and breathe for, you will be in hell. That's the only way to actually shoulder the full burden of your deathless existence forever. You are literally in hell if you can't love everything and everyone. So let me ask you this. If you had to live if someone just woke you up today and said, hey, Jeff, guess what? You're going to live forever. How important is you being a Democrat? Is that going to really get you through forever? No. How important is being a conservative? Is that going to get you through forever? No. How important is being gay or straight? Is that going to get you through forever? Is being LGBT, whatever the hell you have to be, going to get you through forever? No.
Okay, let me stop you for one moment. Let me stop you for a moment. I get what you're saying about loving everything about your life.
Everything.
But
the question is, do you get it?
But I don't feel that you personally love everything about your life. You don't seem like a blissful person.
No.
You're not in bliss.
Nonsense. That is nonsense, because if your father absolutely loved you and he caught you smoking meth in the basement, he'd break his foot off in your ass. If he absolutely loved you, if your dad caught you smoking meth in the basement, because if my son came home, I'd say, hey, Michael, I love you more than the waking world, but I have other kids. And if you think that you're going to bring the rest of my family down, I'll kill you myself. So you better straighten up. No, I know you don't, but that's the point. When you get to a level to which you are capable of making the actual, real, full-blown decisions of having other people live and die by the breath of your shoulders, those are the qualities of the decisions you're going to have to make in this life. And guess what? The world is falling apart because nobody wants to actually summon up the strength to make decisions like that.
All right, let me get to the next question here. How do we eliminate consciousness and create a world that is best for all life in the physical reality?
How? So I'll tell you how. You love absolutely everything about your experience, especially all the evil. And that's not the answer you want. That's why you're in hell. That's why you're in hell. You cannot bring yourself to do what Jesus Christ told you. Love the evil.
Right. Okay.
Love your enemies.
I still got to get back to the point that because all these prophets brought a message of love.
And I'm bringing that to you. But the problem is this. You're all addicted to heroin. You're all addicted to things being told to you in the overblowingly sweet way that kept you literally locked in the prison of your consciousness. That the nightmare is going to go on and go on and go on until something bad enough comes along and wakes you up. Now, it might actually, if it's not me, because if you look at your Old Testament,
right,
what did prophets appear as?
Right. The only thing
screaming our heads off from the streets, telling you, "Hey guys, you're all going down in a bed of fire."
I'm going to stop you there because the only thing I can tell you is, like I said, I've had more than 600 interviews with people who've died and come back, and
yeah,
they are in pure bliss when they come, and they forget about this life. They don't care about this life. I'm telling you something. Many of them, not all of them.
No, I'm telling you something. That's all well and good. However, you have to understand, if they're only in pure bliss when they come back, where did the 50% else of reality go?
What do you mean, where did it go?
Where did it go?
It's still here.
No, it's still here. So how much of reality are they actually conscious of? Right. They're not integrating their darkness. It's an opiate. So when you're actually dealing with Satan, what he's going to do is that he's going to masquerade himself as all the sweet candies of your universe. And he's going to get you to eat them up. And you're going to eat them like pets. And you're going to fall deeper and deeper into this self-suckering hole of believing anything that's going to basically be comfortable, so you don't actually have to do the hard pivot to actually show up and tell the truth. So you don't have to show up and you could actually get to work on time and pay your bills correct. So you don't have to stop cheating on your wives. So you don't have to show up and say, hey, guess what? Not my every single sexual impulse that comes up just doesn't deserve to be granted just merely because I feel it. Because the real stakes is this. If you had to live forever with yourself, and if that was it, where would you be? If you ask your fans, if you ask your listeners, every single one of them will tell themselves the truth. If I had to live forever exactly the same life that I'm doing, I'm in hell. So my question then is, what's the difference at that point? When your own consciousness is the hell you're living. What's the difference?
How about this? A lot of people, when they're on the other side, experience that we are all the same and we are all God. So if I'm God and you are God, then how can we be in hell?
First of all, the concept is this. God is an all-loving God. So because God is an all-loving God, God loves all possibilities. Now, because God loves all possibilities, God also loves living out all possibilities. If God loves living in all possibilities, he loves being the one who subjects himself to the torture. If he loves being the one to subject himself to the torture, he loves being the one that dies in the concentration camps. Now, the problem is this. This is an eternal condition that God has, which bifurcates his consciousness in two competing camps. You have the Michaelic and you have the Satanic. The Satanic dimensions of consciousness are the ones that want everything to be sweet and nice for all time, and they cannot come to terms with the fact that God is as crazy as he actually is. So they're all at war with God, which is at war with the ultimate nature of reality itself, because they cannot bring themselves to terms with how unbelievably maniacally insane it is.
All right, but you're still not. I don't think you're really answering my question.
So sharp. What I'm saying is that you have to sharpen the question up. God is nuts, and you're expecting an answer that made sense.
How could God be nuts if God created everything? We
God
can't
created
even.
crazy people.
But
did God create crazy people?
Of course, yeah. Then if He created
so
everything,
they're made in His image. That's it. He imagined them from the inside out. He put them together from the inside out. He put their schizophrenia together from the inside out. How crazy do you have to be in order to engineer schizophrenia? Right. You have to be supremely crazy. How crazy do you have to be in order to engineer dementia so you could put yourself in that experience merely just to have it? You have to be as crazy as God. So there's no experience in the cosmos at all that is not fundamentally sacred. The problem is this: are you too profane to find the sacredness in it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Can you look in? Could you? Yeah, and this is the thing. I don't come with a comfortable message.
All right, I understand, and sometimes guests don't. I really don't. And I'm going to ask you this. Now we're getting towards the end of the show here. If people want to reach out to you and ask you questions or learn more, are you open to that? What's the best way to contact you?
Right now, I'm in the process of formulating everything. I'm in the process of putting all of it together. There's an entire book which is going to be released. It's called The Deathless Light.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be released in 4 epochs. The Deathless Light, Epoch 1, is being completed right now, 100 pages. Second epoch will be approximately just as long. I will explain everything you need to know. And last but not least, I'll also be able to explain everything that you don't need to know. Now, if you would like, this is for you. I would like to share, in closure, one of the revelations that I got directly from God.
All right. Is it a positive message?
It's whatever you take from it. O moonthroll of my lunacy, I am my madness, I am headless love, I do not care. All I want is mad and madder still. To live and die each day, even as I waken you, my night, my fall, my morning star, my break of day. For I am come, the rose dawn of my deathless heart. Come, beloved, laughing holy heresies in the depth of our despair. Falter for our face, beloved, mad as reason is when stricken by the beauty of the world begotten of our genius. For what have we woven, if not all the world from a diamond's dance of genius? A universe we forged from poetry, diamond eyes, and crystal skulls. My corpse a sea of tiger lilies, rising into cityscapes, even as we shine the shadow of the cross upon the walls of Plato's cave. Then say, I am strange and without explanation, though. I am my unknowing of myself. The spellbound pitch of gnosis, nightful to the where and whence of our arrival. I cannot recount my doing here, nor can I, the merely present, recollect myself, the soul of foreign, after that I am. For I am here, the soul of here itself, the image of a prophet, sinner, lover, and a liar, whom the wise would never dare believe a thing I speak, least of all beloved me. I am both God and Satan, even as I am your death and resurrection. I am roses blooming from a corpse, my darkness shining in the heart of every atom, even as I am the noonday haunt of Hiroshima.
All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming and being my guest. I appreciate you.
Everything that I say.
You didn't leave an email address or a contact point if people want to
my
contact
email
you.
address will be deathless.light@protonmail.
All right.
Okay. That's where I want to be contacted with. I'm still having a difficult time coming to terms with this. And it's a message that I have to get to all of you. It's not going to be comfortable for all of you, but some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've ever experienced levels of horror that you don't even know how to get your mind around, and you knew this was the case, you find me. There's a deeper explanation for all of this. You are here, literally, to fight the fight. It's time. We're here. We showed up. You're not going to die here.
Michael, thank you for being my guest this evening. I appreciate you.
Jeff, you have to understand something before you go. I love you.
I love you too.
And I would not come at you with the level of intensity if I didn't love you. I love you. I'm one of the few people who does. I love you.
Thank you. I love you too,
from the
Michael.
bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. I love you too.
I love you.
All right. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Let's give him a round of applause. And I think Mika wants to say hello to everybody. Her hair is combed. And she's here waiting to say hello. She's getting a little grooming. Here she comes. Here is Mika. I saw somewhere in the chat. I'm trying to make sure Mika is not all. She's not all tangled up in the wires, but someone said in the chat that she came here to see Mika. And so here she is. But she doesn't have any, she's just been laying down, so we kind of woke her up. Maybe she's a little sleepy. All right, so as I was saying earlier, that tomorrow night's guest is Rob Gauthier, and he channeled an ET named Aradif, and it was an amazing channeling session. It was very, I don't know if intense is really the right word. He just, he gave a lot of information, and you may need to watch it a couple times to process it all, but I think you're going to enjoy it. So that's for tomorrow night. I was with another guest the other day that I recorded, and his name is Ian Campbell, and he has a lot of his own UFO footage with night vision goggles, with regular cameras and stuff like that. And so that is, there, I can bring Mika back. And then there is that is the next one, I think, is what's going to be next. And let me see what's coming up this week so I can share with you what's going on. Let me pull up my schedule. Now, there's a guy that is another YouTuber named AJ Parr, and he has a channel, and a lot of you may know him, and I think he's had some sort of an NDE-like experience. He's going to be hanging out with me on Monday. I have another NDE to record on Tuesday. I have Dr. Christine Dolahan on Wednesday. I forgot what we're going to talk about. I didn't put it in my notes. Another NDE on Thursday. On Friday, I have two guests that I have to record, Heather Taylor and her NDE, and then I'm having back Paul Anthony Wallace, who I've had 2 or 3 times, and he has the Eden book series, and he was some sort of preacher, pastor in Australia for many years, and now we're talking about UFOs and all kinds of stuff, and he has a lot of great information, so I'll be recording with him on Friday. And let's see, who else? I've got to record, maybe he's a famous guy. The following week I have a guy that used to be a famous punk rocker, and now he became a monk. And so that is going to be an interesting conversation. I have a somewhat famous UFO experiencer named Sev Tak, another NDE, and then Jerry Sargent. I'm not sure if you've heard of Jerry Sargent. And by the way, was it next Saturday night or 2 Saturdays from now? 2 Saturdays from now, April Doucette, she's one of those ghost hunters. I had her a long time ago. That she was on, she was like on those ghost hunting TV shows, and she's a psychic, and she wants to come back, and I think that she, well, I don't know if she's going to do psychic stuff for the audience or what. I can't remember, but we talked about that a little bit. So I think that will be a really cool Saturday night for you guys. I hope you will enjoy it. By the way, again, as I'm finally keeping up with it for the people who are members that are silver and gold level members. I once a month will hang out with you guys for an hour, and it's not live, and we just talk about whatever you want to talk about. And so I promised everybody that I'm going to do the first Sunday of each month, and that's the best way for me to keep up with it. So it's tomorrow night at 7 p.m. If you are a silver or gold member, you can hang out with me. It's not live, and we just talk about whatever's going on. And actually, last month's was the best. I don't know if you could say the best one. I guess it's the best one. It's the most people that came, because I had done it many times, or quite a few times, and people just, they didn't show up. And I have a lot of members, and I don't, maybe they're busy, or I don't know, maybe Sunday night's not a good night for them. I'm not really sure, but it was nice to have quite a few people here. It makes it more fun with like the more the merrier, right? So that's going on with that. I'm trying to think about any new things that are going on. Any new? Oh yeah, and so we are revving up our cooking show. We're trying to at least post one cooking video a week, if we can keep that going. And the next one's going to be about broccoli. I'm going to start making broccoli sprouts tonight, so I can make a shake on that one. But to go back to that, we had I love Thai food, and maybe many of you do as well. And the most common dish of Thai food is pad Thai, which is a noodle dish. But one of my favorite ones is called masaman chicken. And it's a yellow curry chicken, and it's really delicious, and it's really easy to make. And we made a video of it and posted it yesterday. And maybe we can put it in the chat. So we made a video of it yesterday, and it's really easy to do if you just buy the curry pre-mix. And if you're a vegetarian, we made it with chicken, but if you're a vegetarian, you can make it with tofu if you want. And it's just as delicious. Well, it should be just as delicious. But I think you guys will really like this dish. And if you like, if you like Thai food, then I think you'll love it. And surprisingly, it'll probably be, more easy than you thought it would be. And I think even Mika liked it. I'm pretty sure we gave her a little bit, and she liked it too. We give her a lot of the food that she eats, and maybe that's why she's so content. See how happy she looks here? We have dog food for her. It's like always there. And she just, will eat it when she's hungry, but then she eats a lot of the stuff that we eat too. And so that's that. And anyways, on my cooking channel, there's one video that drives the whole channel, and I teach people how to make broccoli sprouts, and it's actually really easy to do. And I just basically kind of like made it so simplistic. I mean, if you want to make them, you just basically add water and pour it out twice a day. But I made a video like twice a day. Okay, it's day 2. I'm dumping it out, and then I'm adding more water, and then at the nighttime I do it again. So you can see day by day how the broccoli sprouts are growing. And millions of people have watched it. And so I need to make a video. I had one, but I need to make a new one on making like a smoothie with the broccoli sprouts. And why broccoli sprouts are so important. There is a chemical that when you break the cell wall and you start to chew it or chop it or whatever, it's called sulforaphane, and it's like an amazing antioxidant. And I don't know the exact number, but I believe 1 teaspoon of broccoli sprouts has like 100 times the amount of sulforaphane or antioxidants that a cup of broccoli does. So if you can just add that in your diet a little bit, it's there's videos about how great it is. So I might even put some turmeric in it too, because we used to do that too. We used to do a lot of broccoli sprouts, and we kind of, we did it and then we stopped making them, but we really need to start making them again. And tonight I'm going to do that. I'm going to start that. So hopefully by the end of the week, it takes 5 days to make them. So what is today? Saturday. Hopefully by Thursday, I'll be ready to make a shake and have that up for you guys. So that's there. And that's about it, really. And did you post the video? Yeah. Okay, the video is there. And if you guys would even do us a favor, we would really appreciate it if you go watch it right after we finish here. That would be double awesome for me. So again, guys, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. I really appreciate you guys. And we're thankful that you come watch our videos. So have a great rest of your weekend. We love you. God bless